My name is Evelyn Ravenswood. I am 53 years old, and I sit here today as the owner of the Augustus Hotel. But to carry this name, I paid with the life of my father. They said he died of pneumonia. They wrote it in the report, neat and simple, as if it were nothing but an illness. But I know the truth. He died because a door was locked. He died because of the cruelty of a man named Gregory Mallory. I was only 10 when I saw him laid in a coffin. That day, with snow falling on his name carved in stone, I swore I would return. One day, I would make that debt end. New York in the winter of 1982 was merciless. Snow buried the streets of Manhattan, and the wind cut through every crack of stone and steel. Inside the Crescent Crown Hotel, chandeliers glowed for the rich and powerful. Outside the main hall, there was another world, the side entrance, the drafty corridor, the place where the hotel sent men like my father. My father, Augustus Ravenswood, was 42, a night guard, a man of quiet dignity. He bowed when he was ordered to bow. He lifted when he was ordered to lift. And still, they mocked him. Other staff smirked, whispering cheap doorman when his back was turned. They gave him the hardest posts, the coldest corners, the heaviest loads. Yet he carried it, because he believed that honest work had honor. Then there was Gregory Mallory, tall, polished, voice sharp as glass. To him, my father was not a man at all, only a servant to be used and discarded. He would humiliate him in front of others. "Do not make the guests think Crescent Crown hires beggars," he sneered. I remember one evening when a wealthy guest flipped a coin onto the floor. My father bent slowly to pick it up, his cheeks burning. Gregory only smiled thinly and said, "Faster, Ravenswood. Do not keep the guest waiting." I stood a few feet away, my fists clenched, feeling shame that was not mine but his. And then came the night of the locked door. It was December, the coldest week. The heating unit in the side corridor was broken, the glass rattled with every gust. Yet Gregory ordered my father to remain there. "Stand outside," he said. "The VIPs do not need to see you in the main hall." My father asked quietly if he could move inside for a while, his lips already blue. Gregory's reply was ice. "If you cannot endure, then quit. There are plenty of men waiting to replace you." Then he pulled the glass door shut, turned the key, and left my father alone with the storm. All night he stood there, snow stinging his face, hands shaking inside torn gloves. By dawn, he was coughing so hard he could barely speak. At home, he tried to wave it away, saying it was only a chill. Within days, the fever burned. Without good insurance, the hospital was little more than a hallway and a blanket. And still, Gregory laughed. "A guard who cannot handle a little cold is useless," he said. My father died within weeks. No obituary, no wreath from the Crescent Crown, only a plain coffin, a handful of poor friends, and on top, the faded cap of a guard. I can still see it. The cloth frayed, the badge scratched to dull silver. I stood by his grave, snow falling on the name Augustus Ravenswood. I was 10 years old, my hands balled into fists, my breath white in the frozen air, and I whispered, not a prayer, not a plea, but a vow. I said, "I will come back. Not to guard the door, not to beg to be let in. One day I will hold the key, and when I close that door, it will be forever, in the face of the man who killed my father." And from that day forward, the sound of that door slamming against the storm never left me. It followed me, haunted me, sharpened me. The locked door that ended my father's life became the door I would one day own, and I never forgot. I grew up poor, but poverty was never silent. It spoke in the cracks of the walls, in the groan of the radiator that failed more often than it worked. It spoke in the thin coat my mother wrapped around me every winter, and in the hunger that followed me to bed. But beneath it all, there was another sound. The sound of a door slamming shut against a storm, the door that killed my father, That sound followed me everywhere. My mother, Lillian, worked herself thin. She scrubbed floors in houses that were not ours, folded laundry that would never touch our backs, and when I came home with anger burning in me, when I cried that I hated everyone who had laughed at us, she held my hands in hers and whispered, "Do not drown in hate, Evelyn. Turn it into fuel. Burn it clean. Use it to move forward." I listened, and I tried. I took every job that would have me. I stood behind the front desk of cheap hotels, smiling for guests who barely saw me. I carried trays in restaurants where the tips were thrown like scraps. I mopped floors, wiped counters, scrubbed bathrooms. Every insult became a note I wrote down in the ledger of my mind. In those back offices, I found something more. Ledgers, invoices, contracts left carelessly on a desk. I ran my fingers across the paper and realized each line was a story. Every signature had a weight. Every total hid a secret. I began to see patterns, where money vanished, where lies lived between the numbers. I copied them in a small notebook and kept it under my pillow. At night I studied until my eyes blurred. Business texts borrowed from the library, manuals on accounting and law. I filled page after page with notes, each one a brick in the foundation I was building. I told myself, knowledge is another kind of weapon. One day I would need it. Through my teens and into my 20s, the work never stopped. By day, I smiled at guests and carried bags. By night, I traced columns of figures under the green lamp of a hotel office. And always, when my pen touched paper, I heard the slam of that glass door in my head. It reminded me why I could not stop. Years passed and I grew harder, sharper, steadier. Where others saw only endless labor, I saw steps on a staircase. One shift led to another, one hotel led to the next. I earned scholarships, studied management, and carried my textbooks to the front desk. I learned how to calm a furious guest with a single word, how to keep staff loyal with fairness, how to stretch every dollar until it bought me time. I was no longer just surviving, I was building. By the end of the 90s, I had saved enough to take my first leap. A broken little hotel in Brooklyn, the roof leaking, the carpets stained. Most people laughed, but I walked those halls and saw not ruin, but possibility. I bought it, fixed it, ran it with the same fire that had burned in me since that winter night. And when the first profits came, I did not celebrate. I signed the papers quietly, and in my ears the door slammed shut again. Not to haunt me this time, but to push me forward. One property became two became several. I learned to negotiate with bankers who never thought a woman like me could outlast them. I learned to read the silence in a contract, the danger hidden in a single clause. I smiled at their doubts, and I fed them to the fire. 2 decades after my father's death, I stood taller, not rich yet, not powerful yet, but prepared for something greater than small hotels and quiet victories, prepared for the moment I had been waiting for since I was 10 years old, because the Crescent Crown still stood, its chandeliers still dazzled tourists, but its bones were rotting, maintenance delayed, corners cut. The same arrogance that had once killed my father was alive inside its marble walls, and Gregory Mallory was still there, still wearing his tailored suits, still walking the corridors as if they belonged to him. I did not move too quickly. I listened. I gathered whispers from housekeepers and clerks, invoices that had been signed but never fulfilled, numbers that did not add up. Each one went into a folder the color of ash. Each one carried the same echo, the slam of that door. I knew my time was coming. I could feel the city shifting, feel the opportunity drawing closer. When brokers began to hint that Crescent Crown might be sold, I sat very still, letting the weight of it sink in. This was not just business. This was blood and bone. And so I waited, sharpened, prepared. Every contract I signed, every key I turned, every property I claimed, they were all practice. Each one was another stroke of the pen that brought me closer. Each one carried the sound I had lived with for 20 years. the sound of a door closing, waiting to be opened by me. By the year 2010, the Crescent Crown was no longer untouchable. Its marble still gleamed, but the shine was only skin. Debt ate at its bones. Vendors whispered of unpaid bills. The owners argued in quiet, desperate rooms. And I was waiting. I had grown my chain of hotels. I had signed contracts with a steady hand. I had gathered partners who believed in my fire. One of them was Marcus Tran, sharp, cautious, but bold enough to walk beside me. Together we stepped into the negotiations, and when the ink dried, the Crescent Crown was ours. I returned at last to the place where my father had died, but I did not march in as his daughter. I walked in as a stranger, polished, distant. I let the mask cover me. To Gregory Mallory, I was nothing more than a new investor, a woman too busy, too far removed to see the gears that turned beneath the lobby lights. He believed me. Of course he did. Arrogance makes men blind. I did not fire him. That would have been too merciful. Instead, I left him where he stood. I let him keep his title, his office, his illusion of control. I needed him in motion. I needed him to believe he was still the predator. In the shadows, I built my net. Sofia Delgado, my lawyer, fierce and calm, who could cut a man to ribbons with a single question. Janet Miller, a former accountant who once fled these halls, carrying her own scars from Gregory's corruption. Together we began the slow work of gathering threads, invoices, receipts, records that did not match, each piece small as dust, until the dust began to choke him. I watched him in boardrooms, his hand sliding across paper, his pen scratching with that familiar rhythm. It was soft, but to me it roared. The sound of ink on paper became the sound of a lock turning. Each forged signature was another slam of the door that had killed my father. Every false flourish echoed like iron on glass. Gregory grew bolder. Greed makes men sloppy. He approved repairs that never happened. He created vendors who existed only in his head. Sophia recorded his meetings, every word calm, every pause deliberate, drawing him further into his own lies. Janet traced the currents of stolen money, each path leading back to his desk. But predators scent danger. He began to suspect. He sent flowers to my office, invitations to dinners where the real business would never touch the table. I declined them all. Then came the bribes. Velvet boxes slipped across the desk, gold cufflinks that glinted too brightly. I returned them without comment. And when gifts failed, he tried warning me. One evening he cornered me in a corridor lined with mirrors. The light was dim, the air close. His cologne mixed with the sourness of wine. "You may own the shares," he whispered, "but I own the bones of this place. Remember that." For a moment I thought he saw me, that he recognized the girl who once hid in the shadows. My heart stilled, but his gaze slid away, dismissing me as nothing more than a woman in a suit, and I let him believe it. The duel grew sharper. He fed me reports fat with lies, waiting for me to trip. I smiled, nodded, passed them to Sophia. Her pencil tapped the margins. "Here is the rot." Janet returned with files that smelled faintly of dust and deceit. We never rushed. We never shouted. We only watched. And the snare tightened. Once, I slipped. In a meeting, his eyes caught mine when an old staff list flickered across the screen. On it was my father's name. My breath faltered. For one terrible second, the world narrowed to his gaze. Did he know? Could he see the child buried beneath the years? But a phone rang. A laugh broke the moment, and his suspicion faded. I walked out calm, though inside my pulse hammered like a fist on a locked door. I stood alone that night in the same corridor where he had once sealed my father's fate. I pressed my palm against the glass. Cold seeped into me, but I did not flinch. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not tonight." Patience was my weapon now. The file grew thick with proof. Sophia had her recordings. Janet had her ledgers. And I had the silence of a hunter. Every signature Gregory scrawled was another nail in his own coffin. Every flourish of his pen was the sound of a key turning against him. I let him write. I let him boast. I let him build the case that would cage him forever. The predator thought he was still hunting, but the truth was simpler. He was already caught. He just had not heard the door close. Not yet. By the year 2012, the scaffolding was gone. The carpets were new. The marble gleamed as it had decades before. But above the doors, a new name burned against the winter night: the Augustus Hotel. That night, I stood in the lobby, not as a girl in the shadows, not as a daughter begging the world to see her father, but as the owner. The orchestra played. The chandeliers scattered light like stars. Politicians, bankers, and patrons filled the ballroom with laughter and glass. They raised their champagne to me, but I was listening for something else. The sound of a door, waiting to close. Gregory Mallory was there. He walked through the room as if it still belonged to him, his hair silvered but still polished. His smile stretched thin, the same smile that had once cut my father down. He believed the past had been buried. He believed he was untouchable. He believed I had left him safe. I let him believe I let him shake hands and toast to the future. I let him boast of renovations he had never managed. I let him taste his last hour of false triumph. Then the music swelled, the applause rose, and I stepped onto the stage. The lights found me. The room hushed. I looked over the faces, rich men, wealthy women, all waiting for a speech of gratitude. Instead, I gave them truth. Tonight we open not only a hotel, I said, we open a door that was once closed. We honor the man who stood at that door with dignity, though the world gave him none. We honor Augustus Ravenswood. His name filled the ballroom, the name of a night guard who had been erased. Gregory froze. His glass tilted. His face drained. He knew. I pressed the button hidden in my palm. The screen behind me lit up, not with fireworks, but with records. Invoices forged. Budgets drained. Signatures that leaned right with greed. Then came the voice. His voice. Cold and familiar. Stand outside. The guests do not need to see you. Faster, Ravenswood. Do not keep them waiting. Gasps spread through the hall. Murmurs rose like wind through trees. Eyes turned to Gregory. He stammered. He called it fabrication. He called it conspiracy. But the screen kept bleeding truth. Sophia's recordings, Janet's ledgers, the evidence he had written with his own hand. He broke. His mask shattered. He pushed past the guests, desperate for escape. I knew where he would run. Predators always return to their lair. He ran for the side corridor. The old door. I followed at a distance. I did not need to hurry. The trap was already sprung. At the end of the hall, the glass door loomed, the same door that had ended my father's life. Gregory shoved it open, as if freedom waited beyond. But instead, he met the officers. The steel of their handcuffs clamped down. The click rang sharp. Final. Merciless. For an instant, he looked back at me, and in his eyes, I saw the recognition he had denied for years. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer the child he ignored. I was the heir of the man he destroyed, and the owner of the door he once locked. The officers marched him back through the ballroom. The crowd parted in silence. Then applause began, soft at first, then swelling, then thunder. Applause not for me, not for the spectacle, but for the man whose name now crowned the hotel. Applause for Augustus Ravenswood. I stood at the threshold of the corridor, the place where my father once shivered in the storm. The glass door swung shut behind Gregory. This time it was not my father trapped outside. It was him. The sound of the slam echoed through me. The applause, the metallic click of iron, all blending into one rhythm, the rhythm of justice, the rhythm of a vow kept after 30 years. I lifted my eyes to the golden letters burning against the night. The Augustus Hotel. His name my triumph, our vindication. And I whispered into the storm, "The door is ours now, Father, and it will never close on us again." The ballroom is silent now. The music is gone. The last glass has been cleared. Only the hush of the marble remains, the echo of my steps across the floor. I stand in the lobby of the Augustus Hotel. The chandeliers shimmer softly, no longer for an audience, but for me. This place is mine, yet more than mine. It carries his name. It carries my vow. I walk slowly, letting my hand trail along the polished banister. Every detail carries memory. The marble that once seemed too grand for me to touch, the chandeliers that sparkled above me when I was just a child, pressed into a corner, invisible to the guests. Back then, I thought this place belonged to others, to men in tailored suits, to women in jeweled gowns. Now it belongs to him, and through him to me. In the corner is the glass case. Inside rests a single cap, once black, now faded, the edges frayed, the badge dulled to silver. It is the cap of a night guard, the cap my father wore on the night he was locked outside. I rest my hand against the glass. It is cold, but not the cold that kills. It is the cold that steadies, the cold that reminds me how far I have come. And my voice breaks the silence. 30 years ago, this door closed and took my father from me. Tonight, it opens again. It opens for families who need a chance. It opens for workers who deserve respect. It opens for children who will never have to watch the people they love vanish into the storm. The words hang in the air. They are not just for him. They are for me. They are for every soul who has ever been pushed aside, told they do not belong, left in the cold while others feasted. I turn and look at the space around me. It is not only a hotel now, it is a promise carved into stone, a symbol of justice, a house of memory. I created the Augustus Ravenswood Scholarship so the children of the staff may walk further than I once dreamed. I placed a statue of my father at the entrance, cast in bronze, tall and unbroken, no longer hidden in the shadows of a side corridor. He stands where every guest must see him. He's the first to greet them, the last to remain when they leave. Guests pause at his feet. Children look up at him, asking their parents his name, and every time his name is spoken, it rewrites the silence that once smothered him. The world remembers him now, not as a servant, but as a man of dignity. I have avenged him, yes, but revenge is only the beginning. Justice must live longer than anger. It must stretch into tomorrow. And so I gave his name not only to stone and steel, but to hope. I closed my eyes. For so many years, all I could hear was the slam of a locked door. It haunted me in every signature, every corridor, every breath of winter. But now, the sound has changed. It is no longer the slam that kills. It is the creak of hinges opening. It is the flow of people stepping through without fear. It is the sound of laughter rising where silence once ruled. Revenge brought me to this place. But justice and love must be what stays. I cannot give my father back his years, but I can give his name the life it deserved. I can give this city a door that no cruelty will ever close again. I think of my mother, who told me not to drown in hate, but to use it as fuel. I think of the girl I once was, staring at snow from a cracked window, swearing one day she would return. I think of the night I watched Gregory led away in chains, the applause crashing like a storm, and I know now, this ending is not his defeat. It is our beginning. I look up at the great glass windows. Snow drifts against them, white and endless. Outside, the night glows with the letters of his name, the Augustus Hotel. Gold against the dark, warm against the cold. And I speak to him, to myself, to anyone listening now. I have taken my revenge, but above all, I have opened this door for those who come after me. If you hear my voice, remember this. Those who are despised today may be the ones who hold the keys tomorrow. I walk slowly across the lobby. The light catches the case. The cap rests in silence. But it is no longer only a relic. It is a crown. It is proof. The doors stand wide. The snow swirls just beyond the threshold. And this time, the door is open. The memory pulls back. The sign burns bright against the storm. The Augustus Hotel shines in the night. His name, my vow, our story, and the door remains open.